When you think of legendary New York newspaper sports columnists, they date back to Jimmy Cannon, Dick Young, Mike Lupica. Today, the New York Post's Mike Vaccaro is one of the last big city New York sports columnists, and he belongs in that group. He's also an author with a new book on the way in March about the Yankees. So we wanted to have Mike Vaccaro, one of my favorites, everyone's favorite, on the main event. Vac, I want to start fast. Growing up, reading the big city columnists, what is Mike Vaccaro thinking in terms of wanting to be a newspaper columnist? And let me be clear to everybody, the Post is online. They got their own subscription, Post Plus with sports. It's still to me like a newspaper at heart, having formerly worked there. So growing up, what is Vac thinking about?
Yeah, the only thing I'm thinking about is how do I get a job there? I mean, you know, it's a corny story, but I tell it all the time, Andrew, and it's true. I mean, my dad took me to Shea Stadium for the first time in 1974, and he started pointing everything out. I was wide-eyed looking at the green grass, and he was pointing at the dugout and the batting cage and the bullpen. He said, "There's the press box." And I said, "What's the press box?" And he said, you whenever read the stories the next day, that's where the guys go to who write them. And I'm like, you can actually make a living at that? And it so happened that my father worked in Manhattan, so what he would do every day is in the morning when he went in from Long Island, he would buy the Daily News, which is a morning paper. And on the way home, he would buy the Post, which was an afternoon paper. So that was the paper he had under his arm when he walked in the door every night. And he threw it to me. And from that day on, from the time I was 7 years old, I said, I want to be a sports columnist at the New York Post. I mean, maybe I should have had higher ambitions than that. But I don't know a lot of people whose dream job when they were 7 years old actually became their real job all those years later. So, that's really what I was thinking. Look, I mean, it wasn't just the Post. I read everything. I read, I grew up on Newsday, grew up on the Post and the Daily News. I read everything and knew right away that was a life that I really found interesting. And it's one that I started pursuing, really from the time I went and worked my high school newspaper as a freshman in high school.
And the New York sports columnist, it has such a great history. I mentioned some at the top, but Ian O'Connor, who we were both teammates with at the Post, now he's a teammate of mine at the Athletic. Mark Kriegel, my guy Wally Matthews, who preceded you. I want to get deeper into all of this, but is there a expectation that when you came to the Post that you had that might have been different? You'd come from the Star Ledger, which is a fine newspaper, but different format when you come to the Post. First, let's just remind everybody, when did you first go from the Star Ledger to the Post?
In November of 2002. So 23 years ago. Yep.
And so was there that pressure or what? How was that for you?
Certainly a lot of it self-imposed, but look, Greg Gallo, who hired both of us, we both know very well, I won't say he was reluctant to hire me, but certainly one of his cautionary flags was that, I was writing 1,100 and 1,200 word columns at the Star Ledger. And he said, we just can't do this. Sometimes I got to, hire a search party to get the point out of your column. And that's not going to fly here. So you got to get the guy in the subway and take him by the lapel and put him up against the wall and say, read this. And I knew I could do that. I mean, I probably should have been doing it anyway, I suppose. I was younger then and probably a little more in love with my own writing. And that was kind of, enabled at the Star Ledger because we had longer column lengths. But I think right away I grew to really appreciate the need for brevity, and it's funny, over the course of the last 10, 15 years, the columns have grown again from about 600 words to more like 700, 750. But I don't mind writing short. In fact, I think it's a great challenge to do that because, you always have it in your mind. Maybe they don't do this anymore, but the guy I always have in mind is the strap hanger who's got like no time to waste with your purple prose. I mean, get to the point. Do you want the guy fired or not? Do you want the guy traded or not? What's your point? Or else I'm moving on. And so I always have that in the back of my head. And it always comes in the fake Gallo voice that we all use. We all have the same Gallo voice, and it doesn't sound like Gallo, but it's always, get to the point, get to the point. And it doesn't sound like that, but that's the Gallo voice for all of us forever.
Yeah, the one I always remember is don't think, right. Which actually, when I was younger, I was like, that doesn't make any sense. But as I got older, kind of some of the Galloisms, they grow on you a little bit.
Call fella.
Yeah, Bob Feller was one when he was that, when something happened, call Bob Feller, get his reaction because he's always a great quote. What type of athlete were you, real quick, before I do this read? I need to know as a growing up. You played hoops, I believe, right?
I played hoops, yeah. I played a little baseball when I was a kid, but I was actually a really serious basketball player. Went to college, went to summer college camps and, fancied myself a Division II or Division III player until I realized I wasn't. And, that's kind of when I pivoted kind of full time to realizing that if I wanted to have something to do with sports in my lifetime for my livelihood, it was going to have to be somewhere else.
So if you wanted an old Mike Vaccaro highlight, WSC Sports, they use AI. They've been doing more than a decade. You just call it up, digital asset management. In seconds, you got Vaccaro in the paint, using the glass for a bucket. You could get that WSC Sports, digital asset management, your league, your team, your network. You have to use WSC-sports.com. Twice weekly podcast, andrewmarchand.com, andrewmarchand.com to subscribe. So, well, first off, give me you said it was a little bit of a struggle getting to get Greg Gallo, who was the sports editor at the time, to convince him. What did you do? How did you go about getting that done?
When Gallo retired, he sent me a packet of all the clips that he'd gotten from me through the years. It was a huge, one of those, and there were like 12, 13 different envelopes in there, and like half of them were unopened. I'm like, thanks, Greg. And look, it was a difficult path to negotiate, especially because, when I first started coming out, first off, the National came along and made some jobs available. But then when the National closed, there was a glut of those guys who were getting jobs that were the only jobs that were available. That's around the time that I was, really trying to get noticed in New York. I was out of town. I was working in Olean, New York for a while, and Fayetteville, Arkansas for a while, and Middletown, New York for a while. It was just difficult. I tried to use every source that I had to get their attention, the sports editors at all the New York papers, and it was hard to get a call back. I got one call back for a college basketball job around 1994 or so, but never actually got an interview. And so I had to actually go all the way to Kansas City to get noticed by the people in New York, which is pretty funny because within about 3 months of being in Kansas City, I got a job offer from the Bergen Record, which I couldn't take because I literally just gotten off the plane to Kansas City. And like 7 months later, I got a similar offer in Newark, and that one was just too good to pass up. And it's really funny how it works out, right? And then I spent 4.5 very happy years in Newark. Jerry Eisenberg was as good a mentor as you could possibly have in this business. A lot of longtime Post readers remember Jerry when his work appeared in the Post. And this was an iconic guy who I traveled with all the time. And it was remarkable when I would take airplane flights with this guy. And, the line getting to their seats would take forever because they all wanted to shake his hand. That happened dozens of times. And, I was fortunate. I had a lot of great mentors in this business. He was one. Dave Anderson was one. I like to joke Serby that he was one, even though he's like, I'm younger than you are. He isn't. But, I've been really fortunate because there's been a lot of people who looked out for me, on the way up and, really kind of instilled in me the importance of paying it forward. And I try and do that now because I'm on the other side of it.
Now I want to get into Lupica and all your relationships through the years. We're twice weekly podcast, andrewmarchand.com to hear the whole podcast here and to listen to all our archives, andrewmarchand.com. Mike Lupica is someone who, as a kid, you read. Give me a little bit, because you come into the Post and Lupica's at the Daily News. And also, I should say, 2002, we're still at... It's coming to an end, but we're still at the Post and Daily News in a tabloid war where it really was a little more cutthroat. I feel like that was sort of, we're getting to the end of it. For you, just Lupica relationship, what has that been like for you through the years?